Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. Today, I am so excited to be welcoming Justine Beauregard onto the show with me, and we are going to be talking all about authentic sales and high converting messaging. Now, if you listened to last week's episode, you know that I went on a rant about some really poor sales experiences that I have had recently. So I am super excited, Justine, to dive in with you and talk about how we do this right, unlike those lovely experiences that I have recently been going through myself. So welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you are here today.
Thank you so much. It actually feels good to be coming in after a bad experience because I'm going to have such a great platform to stand on and not much expectation to follow through on.
I love it. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about Justine and then we'll dive into all the good stuff. So, Justine is a sales coach and trainer who helps business owners have objection-free sales conversations that are enjoyable from start to finish by tapping into their natural sales skills and abilities. After helping to scale multiple businesses all the way to $300 million, she knows where people get stuck when selling and what makes them truly successful, which she loves to share about on her podcast, People Over Profit. All right. So, speaking of those bad sales experiences that I had, in all 3 cases, I said no and did not hire the person because of the mistakes that they made in their sales experience. And so, I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are some of those mistakes that people make that have them losing the sale and they don't even realize that that's why they lost the sale?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good question. Okay. So there's 2 that stand out to me right away, which is overselling and underselling. And then there's a third one, which is unselling, right? So we've got overselling, which is the person, this person who's like limited time offer, you can get in with this thing and that thing. And there's always a way in, there's always a way to convert. There's always this tactic to kind of lean on that just they don't know when to stop. And it can be really subtle too. It doesn't have to be that extreme of an example, but I want to illustrate the extreme so that everybody can get a very clear picture of what this looks and feels like. And then there's the underselling for the person who basically, I call this lying to the prospect, where they say, like, let's just get on a casual chat and I promise not to sell to you. And then they get on the casual chat and they start selling right off the bat, or weave in some pitch after they've just said, I'm not going to do that. And what I tell people all the time is just don't address the sales component at all. You don't have to say, I'm not going to sell to you. You don't have to say, I am going to sell to you. You just go in with an open mind, because you end up kind of giving them this feeling of being duped, or shifting the conversation from this one side where they're building trust and really starting to like you and get to know you and who you are. And then the minute you shift into that, even if you have a great pitch, even if it really is an aligned offer, they're going to feel like, well, now everything that we just worked on building for the past however many minutes has just been undone. And then unselling is focusing on all the things when you make it about you. So like, you think your offer is great. You focus on the features, you focus on the pricing, like all of these things, versus selling the outcome, tailoring it to the person that you're talking to, which doesn't mean creating a bespoke offer every time, but it does mean thinking about your offer and aligning it to the person that you're talking to in a way that makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to make offers to people who we can't help or don't feel like we're equipped to help. And so I just had a sales conversation this morning, and at the end of the conversation, the woman's like, I'm so excited to move forward. And I said, okay, great. Do you have any other questions? And she said, I guess the only question I have is, do you feel like after listening to everything that I said, that you can help me? And my response was, I wouldn't be making you an offer if I didn't think that I could. And she smiled and nodded and said, I had a feeling, but I always like to ask that because I believe that this is what I need. I believe that this is my best next step. And that is true. That is what most people want to know. That's all they want to know is, can you help me achieve the thing that I'm trying to achieve? So just answer that question for them.
So good, and it's almost as if you listened to last week's podcast episode, which at the time of this recording has not yet been released. But it's I mean, all of I feel like I experienced all of those things recently, and there were
Yeah.
3 stories that I highlighted, and the first one that you shared, the one about overselling, makes me think I get asked a lot to do collaborations and partnerships with people, and there was one person who is such a lovely human, and I really enjoy her as a person, but I would not do a collaboration with her because she is the queen of overselling. Everything
Mm,
is the fast action bonus, the value stack that you're gonna get this, and I'm gonna give you 85 bonuses, and you've got to act right now. And I'm like, I just can't do it. Like our styles are so distinctly different that as
mm.
I love you, like we cannot partner together.
That's so important to know your brand values and the things that you want to make sure you're aligning yourself to. It's like the classic example of a vegan actress who's promoting McDonald's burgers, right? Like you can't show up in one way and then show up in a different way and expect to maintain that trust. And like at the end of the day, sales is about building and maintaining trust with people. And so when you're talking about authentic selling as a concept, it's really the minute you're trying to be authentic, you have failed at being authentic because all you need to do is show up as yourself 100% of the time. And I think it's difficult for people to be vulnerable. And we don't want to disappoint our friends and people that we respect and admire, even though they have a different way of going about selling or a different style of delivery or something like that than we have. And so it's hard to navigate those conversations. And I'm curious, how did you respond when they asked you for a collaboration in a way that still made you feel good and didn't destroy the relationship? Because I think that's a helpful perspective that people listening would be like, that happens to me all the time and I never know what to say.
So, one thing that you will find if you ever approach me with anything is I am very honest because I think I always want people to be honest with me. I don't want it necessarily sugar coated, but I also want it shared in a super supportive way. And
Yeah.
so that's the way that I tend to approach it. So I told her exactly what I said. I was like, listen, I love talking to you. I love your work. I love what you do. But when I hear your approach to selling and when I see what you do, it's not only really different from how I sell, but the way you approach it is usually what I coach people not to do. And so I
Wow.
just don't feel like it ends up being really aligned. I love that that works well for you. I know you have a really successful business. It feels to me like if we partnered up, it would be out of the integrity of my what I share with my clients. And so I just don't think it's a really good fit right now. And so that was how I shared it back with her. And again, I'm not telling her she should change her selling style. It works great for
Yeah.
her. Good. Like, keep doing that if it works for you. But it's literally the exact opposite of what I tell people to do. So I felt like I'd be out of integrity if I then partnered with her and was showing up in that way.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think another helpful tip in this way, if people listening are not as brilliant at kind of pitching and positioning those responses in such a way, like some of us are not as comfortable saying those things so directly. And so I like to revert to just plain curiosity, right? So I would say to that person, like, I love that you asked that. I'm curious, why do you think I would be a great collaboration partner for you? And usually their response is really generic, right? It's, well, I'm just looking to do more collaborations this year and I like you. So I thought it would be a good fit. And that's when you can kind of go deeper and get more and more curious to the point where they're actually starting to realize maybe this isn't a good collaboration. Sometimes, just with those specific types of people, the more questions you ask, the more clear it becomes to them, like, this person has a lot of questions. I don't like that because I want to get right to the point, and I want to have people who are like a hell yes right off the bat, right? And so sometimes just by being curious and genuinely being like, I don't know how this would work and fit together is a telltale sign that it's not a good partnership. And usually smart people will catch on to that pretty quickly too.
I love that perspective, and I think especially if it's someone that you don't have a really close relationship with and you don't know really well, that's such a great, great way to
Yes,
approach it. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's
of
brilliant.
course.
All right, so let's dive into sales. And then I want to talk a little bit about messaging because I know the two are so tightly coupled. But when it
Yeah.
comes to selling, it's really interesting. Some people may be really great at sales and still have like that pit in their stomach every time they're about to hop on a discovery call or a sales call. And they never feel really confident in it, even if they get fantastic results with it. There's some people that naturally love to sell or who've kind of learned to love to sell. But for those who maybe don't necessarily have that sense of love right now for selling, what do you think causes that? Or what are some things that you've helped people work through so they change their perspective on it?
Well, I'm not sure it's always the need to change their perspective on it, right? Sometimes it's, and I was having this conversation with a friend and colleague the other day when he said, I feel like with selling, a lot of people need to shift their mindset around selling before they sell more. What are your thoughts? And my response was, it's a chicken and egg scenario. Sometimes you need to throw people in the fire to just get them to warm up to it. Like, the more times you do it, that's going to build your confidence because we build it up so much in our head that we're not actually having sales conversations. And the confidence comes from that regularity a lot of the time of just jumping into the pit with people and figuring out what you need to feel good about it. And then other times, you are literally paralyzed in fear and you can't bring yourself to get on those conversations. And in that case, you do need to work on the mindset a little bit more before you get to that phase. So I think the person it sounds like you're describing is the person who they just maybe aren't having as regular of sales conversations. And so they're not as trained to make it old hat. Like, I just want to get on 5 calls every single day. And that's my commitment to my business. And that's going to just turn into riding a bike, right? We just train ourselves to do that. There's another piece of this. There's actually Mel Robbins. I love her podcast, I love her books. And one of the things that she said was about her anxiety flying. And I remember her telling this story that she was going somewhere to meet a friend or do a speaking engagement or something. And she was on the plane and she was having so much anxiety. Her whole, like, she almost got off the plane because her whole body was like tensed up and she was nauseous and sweating and all of these emotions. And then she just told herself, I'm feeling this way because I'm excited. I'm excited about talking to people and changing lives and seeing my friends and doing these things and whatever it was, and just reprogrammed her mind to see the positive side because fear and anxiety manifest the same as excitement in the body. So we can choose whatever storyline, and belief is a very powerful thing, right? So I think part of it too is just like, what is the story that you're telling yourself about that sales conversation? And where are the areas in which you notice your anxiety is kind of spiking? Is it when you talk to certain types of prospects that make you nervous? Is it the fact that, you're uncertain of the outcome? And in that case, I think going back to your sales process and reflecting on metrics, I have something called the praise folder, and I put screenshots and testimonials and all of these great things into my praise folder that helped me remind myself of how good I am at my job before I get on to sales conversations when I'm feeling that kind of sense of anxiety. And I don't think anybody is immune to it. I've been teaching sales for 17 years, and I still sometimes will get on a sales conversation and be like, oh, I'm really nervous about this one. Like, this one, I don't know what it is. Like, it's something about the person is just, maybe they have just a more confident personality or persona than I'm used to or something. Or maybe their business is like a little bit ahead of what I've typically coached people on. And I'm just uncertain if I have a place there. Like, there's something that's popping up for me. And I'm always questioning, like, what is that thing? How can I be a little bit more prepared? What storyline can I tell myself to kind of shift my mindset as I walk into it? And sometimes it's just reminding yourself that even the best speakers get nervous before they step onto a stage. And selling is an interaction with a lot of unknowns because you're dealing with humans. And so you're not going to get the same outcome every time. And sometimes it's just the acknowledgement of, I don't need to be overly prepared if I can be curious and present with people. If I have those inherent skills, I can move with the conversation. So sometimes it's just a skill building practice. And like, I want to give myself a couple more tools in the toolkit. So the next time I enter into a sales conversation, I feel pretty certain that there's nothing that's going to come up that I can't either answer or directly address in a way that makes me feel good. So, those are just some of the strategies I would recommend.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And one of the things that you said there that I really like is just kind of going into the call with curiosity, right? And there's nothing worse than when you're in a sales conversation and you can tell that somebody is highly scripted. They're practically reading a script to the point that they're not even listening to you because they're just trying to get through this perfect script that's going to help them convert.
Totally.
And I mean, it's painful. It's painful for everybody. It's probably pretty painful for them too. And so I really love the idea of going in with curiosity. And it just, to me, sales should be an invitation for the right person. It shouldn't be anything that feels forced or icky for anybody.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's dive a little bit into messaging because I think our messaging has a lot of impact on sales and how well we do with sales. So, what do you see as some of the mistakes with messaging or things that you would recommend people do differently to get better results and better conversions?
I think people do one of two things as the big glaring mistakes that I see as like generic advice about messaging. They either oversimplify or don't simplify enough. So, for example, I talk to a lot of people who have businesses like VAs, right? Or administrative assistants or OBMs or these time management coaches. And they all kind of have this very generic pitch of like, I help people take back their time. And I'm always like, what does that mean? Like software, automation, outsourcing, delegation. There's so many things that can help people take back their time. So you need to be more specific as to how you do that. Right? It's not just helping people take back their time because so many things can do that. And essentially, the more specific you are, the less worthy rivals you have to compete with. Because when you're very specific, like I help people have a zero inbox so that they're always on top of their messages, they have no anxiety about what's coming up, and all of these things. That is one specific way for someone who's like a virtual assistant to pitch themselves, but maybe they do a collection of things. And so sometimes it's really figuring out what's the collection of things that I do and what's the through line. What is that whole goal throughout that whole process? And so there was actually a business coach that I was coaching, and she coaches brand new business owners and she coaches people who've been in business for 20 years. And she was having this really weird process of trying to land on a message that spoke to both audiences without having totally separate landing pages and all different kinds of messaging. And so we talked for a session about what is the thing? What is the through line? And actually in the first 5 minutes we found it because it's usually pretty obvious. And what we figured out that it was the idea of expansion. So for her, her whole goal was no matter if you're brand new to business or 20 years in, you have this deep inner calling to expand in some way, to grow in some way. And these are the things that I focus on and teach. And it comes at different levels. If you're brand new, this is what it's going to look like. If you're more experienced, this is what it's going to look like. And so the specificity of her offer and her skill set and zone of genius is what helps create that really specific and great messaging. Now, notice there's a lot of brands out there that can say, I help you expand. But what she was doing is really applying it in specific value propositions and specific scenarios in which her people would be looking to expand, the pain points associated with that expansion, the different things that would pop up, the questions they would have. So they really felt related to in that messaging. So that's one side of it. And then on the other side, it's being super, super specific to the point where you're so niched And the thing is, so like you've almost oversimplified. And so when I meet people, I was guilty of this. I'll use myself as an example and be vulnerable here. So I was trying to figure out my ideal title. And I remember going to this workshop with this woman who's known for like PR and helping people create this really dynamic presence. And I said, I feel like sales coach is like blah, right? Like everybody that I meet is a sales coach. Like it's just a very generic way to describe yourself. And so she's like, all right, let's find some words that describe you. Let's do this whole exercise. So for an hour, I filled out this workbook and I did this whole exercise and I came up with a bunch of words and then I landed on the title, which is still, by the way, on business cards that I have yet to give out but I've had these for a long time. And it was creative business strategist. Cause I'm like, I'm creative. I work with business owners. I have a business. I am strategic in my thinking. Like, I want to help people be creative too. I want to use my creativity. So, this really blends all the concepts. So, I'm a creative business strategist. And every time I would introduce myself, the first question people would ask is, what does that mean? Which to me is an indicator of I'm not being clear enough, right? Like, I thought I was being clear by trying to synthesize everything I do into 3 words, but I've effectively undone that. So then I went back to my true belief, which is your title doesn't matter. And when I introduce myself, I don't walk up to people and say, hello, I'm Justine Beauregard, a sales coach and trainer, right? I walk up to people and say, hi, I'm Justine. How are you today? Right. And then we get into a conversation and they ask what I do and I describe it instead of trying to put a title on it. So sometimes we just need to not synthesize so much and allow it to have a sentence or two, or maybe a phrase or something a little bit longer that feels more like us.
Oh, yeah, I resonate so much with so much of that, and I remember there was one event that I had walked into, and it wasn't even a like, you're not allowed to pitch yourself, you're not allowed to do anything, which was great, it was just an event for connections, and I walked out of that event with over 6, figures in new clients, like,
That's awesome.
walked out with it, and it was just because of how I introduced myself, and I reflected on it afterwards because people always ask, "Well, what do you do?" And it was
Yeah.
how I answered that question, and I thought about it and I was like, I've come to this event for years and I've never had this same response. So what did I do differently this time?
Yeah.
Like, what did I say that had such a different and people following up with me and chasing me down? And it was, I went from saying what I did to saying why I did it. And it was the
Yes.
shift in how I presented. Well, I mean, it's I do the same thing. I've done the same thing kind of my whole career, right? But it was I said it differently and I made it more about their vision and helping them realize their vision as their right-hand person or by training and certifying their existing right-hand person. And it was
Yeah.
the way that I had said that that had me instantly book up all of my services. Like I was booked by the end of that event, which was just wild to me. So
Yeah.
sometimes I think we can undervalue the importance of the messaging, but a slight shift in messaging, I feel like can be so hugely impactful.
Yeah. I mean, especially when people have trademarked or registered, ways that they describe their business or their IP, right? Like it's very different if you walk up to someone and say, I teach people the lean out method. They'd be like, what the heck is
What?
that?
Right.
Like, are you a business coach? Are you an operations coach? Are you a health coach? Like
Oh
that could
yeah.
mean so many things, right? And
Mhm.
so that I find that very interesting when we try to assume that people know what we know. That's like that's your kryptonite when you're
Mhm.
selling, is to come into the conversation thinking, of course everyone knows this, right? And so every time I'm having conversations with people where they're feeling a little stuck and then they go, well, everybody knows what blah 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 means, and I go, well, how do you know that? Well, because I know it. Okay, you know it. Like, does your grandma know that? Does your son who's 7 know that? Like, what is that true really? Because our experiences are so shaped by our perspective that we sometimes forget people don't know our IP. People don't know our industry. People don't know our process or methodology or belief system or any of these things. And so we have to go back to like the human language. How do we describe it in a way, and how do we make it clear for the people who are perfect for us? So I think when you describe that networking event that you went to, it also wasn't just your messaging. It was the fact that you had chosen an event that was aligned
Oh, yeah.
with the right people for what you sell. Because if you went into a room of moms who didn't have
Right.
businesses, even if you were saying, this is my why and this is how I do it, they would be like, good for you. And then they would
Right.
move on because they're not looking for that. So it's
Right.
multiple components that make it
Mhm.
effective. I'm really curious if someone said to you right now, like, what do you do? And you were to take that approach, what would it actually sound like if someone wanted to kind of use it as a frame?
Oh gosh. I mean, to me, it was I was experimenting with it because I experiment with different things all the time, and I honestly never say things the same way twice, which sometimes can be a challenge. But
Yes.
in this event, when I think back to what I said, if I were to break it down into a frame, I think I just said, I love to partner with seven-figure or 7 and 8-figure visionary CEOs to bring their vision to life. And I either do that by taking everything off of their plate as their right hand person, or I mentor, train, and certify the existing right hand that they have so they can completely get out and do their visionary work. And so it
Yeah.
was something along those lines. And I said that, and I mean, every single person that I said that to was like, amazing. That is exactly what I want. Like, does that mean that you would take this off my plate and do this for me? And I was like, absolutely. That's exactly what I do. I had people that
Yeah.
were like, I'm about ready to hire a VP of operations. Could you vet them
Mhm.
for me? Yes, I absolutely can. Like, I actually do a placement services for kind of
Yeah.
C-suite operational leaders. And so it ended up just hitting the mark so well. But again, I was in a room of 7 and 8-figure business owners. And that was the key. If I said that exact same thing to a low six-figure business owner or somebody who wasn't quite there yet, they're like, I'm just hustling my way to try to get to six or multi six figures. Like, I don't need
Yeah.
somebody else to do that right now. I'm not investing in somebody else to do that. And so it's a total different conversation. So I think
Yeah.
it was the combination of not just what I said, but to your point, I was saying the right thing to the right person. And I knew that that was exactly what most of them were looking for.
Mm, yes. And I love that you took a positive approach to that value prop, right? Because what you're saying is, I'm going to take all those things off your plate, make it really easy for you, and just basically they're feeling the
Right.
kind of feeling after they listen to you speak, right?
Hmm.
And I like playing with different value props. Like some are positive, some are negative. So I might walk up to someone and say, hey, I'm Justine. And I always lead with who I am, by the way, and what my name is. So I'm not walking up to people like, hello, I'm a sales coach. Like, I am Justine. I am a human, right? We are both humans. That's okay. But I will usually say when I'm doing the negative value prop, something like, I help small business owners take the guesswork out of where their next client's going to come from and close sales on repeat, because those are the two things that people struggle with the most that are in my client pool. Is they're always like, I don't know where my next clients are going to come from, and I've closed sales, but I've never been able to manage to do that repeatably, right? And so those are the things I focus on. When you introduced me today, you said she helps people sell without objections, which is another thing that I do, right? And that's a little bit more maybe skewed positive, right? But it's also speaking to a negative. And then sometimes I say I help people define a repeatable sales process that makes them feel confident and empowered when they show up to sell, so that they can close more sales effectively. And that's a really positive oriented value prop. And I think it's important to have a blend of these, because depending on the person you're speaking to and depending on the vibe of the event and what people are there for, sometimes people are going to really want you to address the pain points that they're struggling with and know that you can resonate with where they are today. And other times they're really, especially seven-figure visionary entrepreneurs, they want to look to the ease, the scale, the future viability of the business, not necessarily the pain of today, which is showing the nuanced differences between our audiences and what they care about most and like where they are and what they're focused on. So it's all these little details.
It is, and I love this conversation so much because I think that is the key with messaging, right? And I knew the people in the room and I knew that they were possibility people. And so
Yeah.
when I introduced myself, I spoke in the realm of possibility. If I was
Mhm.
in a problem solving workshop or a
Yeah.
networking event, I probably would have approached it differently. And I think to me that some of the mistakes that people make is they get so nervous about like the perfect elevator pitch or the perfect something that they have this like one script that they have. And I think
Mhm.
it goes back to your curiosity comment that you made before. It's like, how can you kind of describe what you do, or how can you meet the person where they're at in what you're saying in a way? And I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I really, really think that was such good kind of diving into the nuances of things.
Yeah, and I love giving examples because for non-sales people or non-trained salespeople, it's one thing to say, talk about your why. And conceptually, we understand that, right? Like, yeah, I'm a mission-driven brand. I love helping people achieve X, Y, or Z results or something like that more conceptually, but actually having it in a frame, like they can listen to this podcast and literally pause it after you speak and after you shared that and write down notes and kind of what I call it is Mad Libs value props. Like you basically take, okay, she said a verb there. So what's my verb? She said a noun there. What's my noun? So instead of 7-figure to 8-figure visionary entrepreneurs, you might say 6-figure life coaches who live in Kansas City, Missouri, right? Like whatever the thing is that you can plug and play a lot of these and use them as models. And that's how your scripts are created. And I think the best scripts are the ones that we create for ourselves that work repeatedly and we don't feel like we have to stick with them, but we know that they're the tried and true thing. So if we need something to fall back on, we're not kind of grasping at straws. We have a proven framework or some sort of methodology that we can lean on and say, I feel confident in how I'm going to show up. This is what I'm going to seek to do. And if maybe I'm not meeting my exact right person, or if something that I kind of thought of isn't resonating, that's the thing that I'll fall back on for today. And I'm going to feel really good and empowered showing up with that in my back pocket.
So good. All right. Tell people about you. Tell people what you do. Tell people what you have going on in your world. Like what's coming up next that you're super excited about?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's so beautiful about the phase of business I'm in now is that it's more of the same is what's coming up for me, which is I am a sales coach and trainer by trade, right? So I teach people how to sell for a living. And so I just like to kind of look at the general landscape of what's happening with sales right now. Is there sort of a certain area that people are struggling with more than other areas? Is there kind of a paradigm shift in the sales industry right now that people are noticing? Like right now, there's a shift to more feminine sales approaches, more compassion, more curiosity, which is thankful for me because that's how I teach sales is to have those things top of mind and in your heart when you show up to sell. But it's really figuring out those things and then just showing up in my proven funnels, following my sales frameworks and going and meeting my people. And basically, I call it the turn up the faucet method of selling. Like when I'm in the mode of, I just need more sales, I just turn up the faucet. And then when I need to scale back a little bit, I turn it down and I have these kind of systems in place. So it's just showing up and coaching people one on one. It's hosting speed networking events to get to meet more people and bring them together. And it's coming on shows and podcasts like this one to network with amazing people like you and share some of these lessons and learnings along the way. Because I think there's so much value in a kind of behind the scenes look from people who are really good at what they do. And I think both of us are really good at what we do.
I think you are brilliant at what you do. And for all of you listening, I'm about to ask where you can go find Justine online. And I have to say, you've got to follow her on social media. Her social media accounts are so good. Like, you do such an exceptional job with your content. It is really clear that you are a master at messaging and at
Thank you.
communicating things really clearly, really simply. And I think you do a really good job also of the perception shifting that can be challenging for people. So tell people where they can find you. And for all of you listening, I really want you to go follow Justine's accounts, because not only is she brilliant, and I encourage you to learn more about her work and, do more in her world, but you will also just get so much value out of the content that she posts as well. So where can people find you?
Okay, can I put you in my pocket and just have you promote my socials everywhere I go?
You got it. Done.
So my social media is Justine Beauregard Coach on most channels. And if you look me up by Justine Beauregard, if you just type Justine Beauregard into Google, I'm the first result, right? Like my website shows up, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my entrepreneur profile, because I've written for Entrepreneur. There's a bunch of stuff there that you can find on me. And so just like pick your poison, pick your favorite place to find me. And one of my favorite places to show up, and because this is a podcast, I'll share, you shared it earlier, but the People Over Profit podcast is a space where I share kind of my behind the scenes take at sales, marketing, business growth in general. It's a lot of lessons that I've learned along the way. They're short episodes, so they really laser in on a specific topic and teach you things that are not just conceptual, like today, share your why, but really go into those models and those frameworks so you can take what you learn and apply it instantly from listening to those episodes. So if that sounds like something that interests you, then go check it out.
Fantastic. All right. And I could talk to you for days and days on end, but I hope everyone goes and
Same.
checks out your podcast to keep the conversation going. But I do have to ask you one more question before we wrap up. And I'm so curious what you're going to say. And that's,
Okay.
how do you work smarter, not harder, and keep things lean in your business?
Yes. Okay. So there's a mantra that I hold very close to my heart, which you're going to love, and I'm sure you probably share. And I teach this to all of my clients. And it is the concept of doing less better. So instead of trying to be on all the platforms, instead of trying to do all the things or create all the offers, it's not about picking one, right? Some people go to the extreme of you have to have one offer, one channel, one audience, one message, one thing. I'm not in that camp necessarily. It's more like the essentialism approach. Only pick the things that really have impact. And if we follow the Pareto principle, we know that 80% of the things we do are not contributing to our bottom line. Only 20% really are. So when I say do less better, I think we focus our time on those 20% of things to really lean out the business, right? And then in 20% of our time, so we spend 80% of our time on those things, in the remaining 20% of our time, that's our sandbox. That's where we get to play and test and do all the fun things to fill out the remainder of time without impacting the bottom line of the business. Because usually what happens is people do work in these extremes and they will either totally lean out their business and then just do what's proven to work and only focus on repeatability and not have any fun and not grow and expand and learn and test and try new things. And then other people will constantly be throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. And we don't want to be guilty of either of those things. We want to fall right in the middle. So that's kind of how I do it and how I teach it. And it's how I've grown my own business by up to 1,800% in a year. So
Brilliant. And yes, I could not agree anymore. You get a big ditto on all of that. I love it. Excellent. Well, Justine, thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful for you sharing all of your wisdom with everyone. I hope you all got as much value out of this episode as I did, and I will see you again next week.
thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. If you have not yet taken our scalability assessment, I invite you to head to leanoutmethod.com/assessment and take our interactive assessment that's going to help you look at how simple, how sustainable, and how scalable your business currently is. It includes personalized recommendations of where to focus next to get your time back, to increase your impact, increase your profits, and ultimately step into your rich, fulfilled life. And finally, we'd love to see you inside our signature program, Simplify to Scale. You can head to leanoutmethod.com/ops to find all of the details on how we can help you uplevel your operations and get out of the day-to-day of your business.